Star Trek: The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy, Deceptions, Chapter 3. The day of departure arrived. Data and Zhu met Tapira and Lucas on the way to the Academy shuttle field, so they all arrived as a group to find Cadet Fantico awaiting. "Stow your gear, let's get going," she said. Before long, their shuttle was in the air. 20 minutes later, the USS Ajax, an Apollo-class starship in orbit around Earth, received the shuttle's occupants, then headed out of the solar system at warp speed, bound for Arunu. The planet wasn't particularly far from Earth, but it was located far from normal space lanes. Few starships traveled near the Carré system, because it had neither inhabited planets nor any planets with valuable resources. It had always been considered barren and worthless. Until the discovery of the Arunuan ruins. When the Ajax arrived at its destination, the cadets beamed down alone. As Data first stood on the planet's sterile soil, he felt as if he'd been there before. The desolate gray horizon reminded him of Omicron Theta, the planet where he had been found 3 years previously by the crew of the USS Tripoli. Like that of Omicron Theta, Arunu's destruction was a mystery. Investigations revealed that it had once been lush with vegetation, and fossils from a variety of animal life had been found on every continent. Data wondered if the study of the ruins would eventually reveal the cause of the planet's demise. "Kinda spooky," said Lucas, adjusting the transparent oxygen mask that covered his nose and mouth. One thin tube ran from the mask down to an oxygen canister attached to a specially designed belt. All the cadets wore such a device. Data turned to Lucas. "Why should such a neutral landscape inspire fear?" "It just does," Lucas replied and shivered. "In fact, something about this place gives me the creeps." Tapira absently ran a hand up and down her arm as if to rub down goosebumps. "At times, I find Lucas's imaginative assessments illogical. But in this instance, I must agree with him. I too feel disturbed." "Perhaps it'd be a warning," Zhu murmured nervously. Data placed his hand on Zhu's shoulder, a gesture he often saw humans make when attempting to reassure others. "There's nothing amiss here, Zhu. Perhaps you are imagining it." "Maybe," Zhu responded, but he didn't sound convinced. E.J. Fantico, who had been standing some distance away, joined the group. "I just reported into the Ajax. She's leaving orbit now. Captain Benoit contacted Professor Spinnaker, who should be here any minute." Data noticed that even her voice held a note of apprehension. It looked unpleasant to be so disturbed, but Data couldn't help wondering what it felt like. "May I inquire why the professor requested that we beam down so far from the archaeologist's camp?" he asked Fantico. "I don't know, Data, but he was specific about it." Tapira suddenly pointed east. "Someone is approaching." From over a distant hill, Data saw a cloud of dust. Seconds later, a dirty gray vehicle topped the rise and floated swiftly toward them. The hover car was an old, open-top model. Its quaint, whirring electric motor made Data think of a giant purring cat. "Cadet Fantico? Hello. I'm Professor Jeffrey Spinnaker," called a sandy-haired man, bringing the vehicle to a hovering stop. Even through the dust coating Spinnaker's oxygen mask, Data could see the man's smile as he hopped out, along with 2 other people. All 3 of them wore masks, faded blue work tunics, and heavy boots. Fantico took Spinnaker's hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Professor. These are Cadets Tapira, Lucas Whitlock, Zhu Luina Bed, and Mr. Data." Spinnaker shook hands with each of them, trying not to stare too obviously at Data. The android recognized the expression, a combination of fascination and caution that many people wore upon meeting him. Data had never understood how two opposing emotions could mix so easily on the human face, but it certainly seemed a common phenomenon. "I am most pleased to meet you, Professor," he said, attempting to quell any uneasiness the human may have felt. Data's efforts proved unnecessary. Spinnaker grinned and shook Data's hand with a firm grip. "And we're very pleased to have you here." He gestured to the group. "All of you. As you might guess, we don't get many visitors. New faces are a welcome sight indeed." He then introduced his colleagues, a tall, powerfully built man named Professor Lincoln Tesh, and a small but sturdy woman named Jingwei Qing. "We're associates on the Arunu project," said Tesh. "Everyone else is at the dig." "Hop in," Spinnaker said, as Tesh hefted the cadets' duffel bags and placed them in the hovercar's cargo compartment. "Annie will get us there in no time." Data cocked his head. "Annie?" Dr. Ching laughed, patting the vehicle. "Yes, Arunu Annie. You'll find that most machines in the camp have names, Mr. Data. It gets lonely out here. Even inanimate objects become friends." The cadets piled into Annie's back seat as the archaeologists squished together in the front. "Everybody wedged in nice and tight?" Spinnaker asked jovially. "And let's go." Annie took off over the barren soil like a thoroughbred racehorse, eager to reach the finish line. Data wondered if Spinnaker always drove like a madman, but the other two archaeologists seemed to enjoy it. The cadets just hung on. "So tell me," Spinnaker called back as he drove, "how are y'all feeling?" The cadets exchanged nervous glances, and Fantico answered, "I think we're all excited, sir, except for Data, of course." "Well," said Spinnaker, "the Aruna dig is an unusual sight. Newcomers always get the jitters. That, by the way, is why I asked you to beam down such a long distance away. It's better to approach the site gradually. When we get there, you'll find out why. Just don't worry if your feelings become intense. They'll settle down soon." And with those mysterious words, Spinnaker turned back to his driving. Within moments, the archaeologist's camp appeared in the distance, a cluster of weathered buildings nestled against the side of a steep hill. "At night, the winds from the north can get pretty bad," Spinnaker told them. "We situated the camp to the south of the tallest hill we could find near the dig." They zoomed past the camp and raced down into a shallow canyon. Spread out like a map below lay the only known ruins of the Arunuan civilization, a checkerboard of sectioned-off squares about 4 meters across, each square in a different state of excavation. Data could distinguish portions of buildings, walls, doorways, and fragments of what looked like roads. Sections of ancient desks and chairs and other furniture poked out, half exposed from the dirt, while metallic fixtures gleamed in the muted sunlight. The archaeologists had set up work tables in each square that were piled with smaller artifacts, most of them still partly encased in earth. Spinnaker brought Annie to a jolting halt. "How are you feeling now?" Data was surprised when none of the cadets responded. Spinnaker's driving hadn't been enough to alarm them this much. They looked more as if they were caught in a trance. Then Tapira blinked and, barely maintaining her stoic expression, said, "Our sensations of unease originate from this sight. Can you explain this, Professor?" Spinnaker and his colleagues hopped out of Annie, followed more closely by the cadets. Data watched his peers with curiosity and concern. "Our greatest discovery about the Arunuans is their form of communication," said Spinnaker. "Their culture was based entirely on emotion, not the kind of emotion that you and I are familiar with. I'm talking about a pure, directed form of psychic energy." "Everything you see here," said Tesh, "the walls of buildings, the tools, the machines, the art, every physical artifact on this site transmits a brief emotional impression when touched. As yet, we have no idea how or why, but what you're feeling are the collected residual vibrations of that energy on a subconscious level." Try as he might, Data could feel nothing. "So, the Arunuans, whoever these people are, do not speak aloud?" he asked. "We're not positive of that," Dr. Ching replied, "but evidence suggests that they were mute. We've only found fragments of skeletons, far too little to theorize about their body structures." At the mention of finding skeletons, Zhu cringed. Spinnaker noticed. "You all right?" he asked. "I be fine, sir," Zhu said hurriedly. "I just be nervous." Spinnaker watched Zhu for a moment longer, then nodded to himself as if reaching a decision. "Starfleet Academy has asked me to give each of you an assignment while you're here." From his jacket pocket, he produced a data pad and handed it to Fantico. "These are my suggestions, which you may give your team when you feel they're ready," he told her. Then they continued to the group. "But for now, why don't you all try to relax and get used to the place? Wander around, ask questions if you like, but I'd suggest refraining from touching anything until tomorrow. Somebody will drive you back to camp in an hour or two." With a wave, Spinnaker left to go back to work. Fantico activated the data pad she'd been given. "I think I'll give your assignments now. It might be helpful for you to observe the activities you'll be doing tomorrow." Consulting the pad screen, she said, "To Pyrrha, you've been assigned to help log artifact statistics. Zhu, you'll be assisting one of the diggers in Section 7. Lucas, you're assigned to the equipment crew. And Data," Fantico paused, studying the data pad screen. "Well, it says here that you're to study the site." "Exactly what will I be studying it for, sir?" Data asked. Fantico shrugged. "It doesn't say. You'd better ask Professor Spinnaker." Spinnaker was already gone, perhaps down in one of the deeper excavation sections, or in one of the work tents nearby. When Fantico dismissed the team, Data started walking to the nearest tent. "Data, wait!" The android stopped and turned around. "Yes, Zhu?" "May I?" Zhu paused awkwardly. Never mind." "May you what?" Data prompted, recognizing that the Tanganese was uncomfortable. But Zhu just shook his head, forcing a smile. "No, never mind. I be okay." And he briskly walked away. For a moment, Data didn't know what to do. Zhu had appeared anxious, but now his walk appeared quite confident. Data concluded that he was all right, so the android resumed his search for Spinnaker. He found a professor in the first tent talking to Dr. Ching, who sat at a table filled with tiny fragments of what looked like plastic. Data stood politely at the entrance until Dr. Ching noticed him. "Why, Mr. Data, come in." Data did so. "I apologize for the interruption, Dr. Ching, but I would like to ask a question of Professor Spinnaker." "Ask away," Spinnaker said. "We were just trading cake recipes." Data simply looked at him, waiting for some kind of explanation for the strange remark. When none came, his eyes darted to one side, a reflex that occurred whenever he made an extensive search of his memory banks. In this case, he was searching for all references that linked archaeology with baking. There were no matches. The sound of Dr. Ching's laughter brought his conscious mind back. "That was a joke, Mr. Data," she said. And then, to Data's surprise, she punched Spinnaker in the arm. "Be nice, Jeff." Spinnaker just grinned. "Data, I'll bet you want to ask me about your assignment." "Yes, sir, I do. How did you know?" "Because I left it vague on purpose. I wanted a chance to explain it to you myself. Mr. Data, I've been informed that your memory banks contain detailed cultural files from species throughout the Federation. I was hoping," and Spinnaker gave a casual little wave of his hand, "to take advantage of your presence, frankly." Data didn't follow. "In what way, sir?" "Well, I'd like you to just look at things. Compare what you see to other similar items you may have stored in your memory. You have the unique ability to serve as a walking database, taking in information from the dig site and comparing it with your cultural files right on the spot. I'd like you to use your unique insight to form theories about Arunuan architecture, about their machines, about their art, about whatever you can think of." Now that he understood it, Data was very pleased with his assignment. "A most challenging endeavor," he said. "I shall do my best." Striding back out into the murky sunlight that constituted an Arunuan day, Data surveyed the dig site. His fellow cadets were wandering about, exploring their new environment. Watching them, Data suddenly understood the clever reasoning behind this field trip and why his xenoethnography instructor had specifically assigned his team to Arunu. Being a Vulcan, Tapira would find the emotional overtones of the site unsettling. She'd been assigned to Arunu so that she could exercise her Vulcan training and learn to tolerate emotional input when duties required. Zhu, whose Tanganese culture revolved around ancestor worship, found the very idea of an archaeological dig disturbing. No doubt he was on Arunu because his future Starfleet duties would require him to tolerate activities that might contradict his strong beliefs. Lucas had no doubt been assigned to Arunu because he was interested in hostile environments. He'd mentioned to Data that, as an engineering major, he wanted to specialize in designing equipment to help people survive in harsh conditions. Data's own presence was obvious. He had no emotions. The study of a culture so steeped in emotional behavior was going to be an important part of his training. While one section of Data's positronic brain continued to watch the activities around him, he accessed his internal memory banks and opened his file labeled Journal. "Dear Diary, I am constantly amazed at how perceptive the human mind can be. After considering my assignment and those of my teammates, I now realize their significance. Each of us has been placed in a situation designed to force us to confront and strengthen our weakest characteristics. I assume the other xenoethnography teams have likewise been placed in such situations. This serves as further proof that my decision to join Starfleet was a sound one. I look forward to learning much during this field trip. Sincerely, Data." Having made his journal entry, Data wondered how he should begin his assignment. He spotted Tapira at the far end of the dig site, studying several statues lined up on a rickety work table. Data decided to join her. What are those objects? He asked as he approached. Tapira didn't answer. Data presumed she was deep in thought, probably analyzing the statue's strange abstract designs. Although they looked different from one another, there was a thread of similarity among them, something that Data couldn't quite pinpoint. Deciding not to disturb Tapira, Data walked over to a storage shed, where more of the objects were piled in boxes outside the door. Whatever the objects were, the Arunoans had created a lot of them. Data tapped on the storage shed door. "Excuse me, may I enter?" No one answered. Slowly opening the door, Data peeked in and saw an amazing sight. Rows and rows of shelves filled with more of the objects. But these had been cleaned. They were dazzling in the overhead lights, a riot of clashing colors from deep blues and reds to the faintest, most whispered greens and yellows. Some had metallic trim, some were decorated with glittering gems, and still others bore markings that might have been some form of written language. Most of them stood at a height of about 8 inches, but a few were as tall as 2 feet. Some were the size of a finger. Data recalled Professor Spinnaker's warning about not touching anything until the following day. The android wondered if that warning actually included him. After all, without the capacity for emotions, what danger could the objects pose to him? He reached out a hand to touch one. Chapter 4. Slap! Data jerked his hand back, and whirling around, found himself facing 3 tall, frost-white humanoids. Amazingly, he hadn't heard them enter. It was difficult to tell what their bodies looked like because of the long, loose robes they wore, but Data thought their heads resembled the earth insect called a praying mantis. Sitting atop long, thin necks, their skulls were triangular in shape, hairless, with large eyes, tiny mouths, and no nose. What Data could see of their skin resembled polished white leather. One of them held a bony hand partway extended. He must have been the one who had slapped Data's hand from behind. "Forgive me," Data said. "I should have asked permission before touching." "CD," snapped one of the creatures in a thin, tinny voice. Data searched his memory banks, but could not find any translation for the word. "CD?" he repeated. "Is that your name?" Another of the creatures waved a long, thin arm at the objects all around them. "CD. They're dangerous. We do not want you to become emotionally damaged." "Do not touch them," warned the third creature in a low hiss, tilting its head at an extreme angle that would have broken the neck of any human. Its bulbous eyes had no lid, so it stared without ever blinking. The eerie aliens didn't disturb Data in the least. "I do not believe the CD can affect me," he told them pleasantly. "You see, I have no emotions." Neither, it seemed, did the strange white aliens. Their expressions hadn't changed once during the conversation, and their eyes lacked a certain sparkle that Data noticed in most intelligent beings. Were these creatures machines, as he was? "Ah, I see you've met our Dirndite associates." The 3 Dirndites swiveled their heads all the way around to look at Spinnaker standing in the doorway behind them. No other part of their bodies moved, just their heads. Such a sight would have startled anybody, but Data, who only found the creature's insectoid behavior fascinating. Spinnaker walked from the doorway to Data's side, and the alien's head slowly swiveled back around as their eyes followed him. "I saw you head this way, Mr. Data, and thought I ought to formally introduce you," the professor said. "This is Scientist Ponshab, Scientist Pon Debek, and Scientist Pen Sazid, representatives of Duranda. Scientists, this is one of the Earth's cadets, Data. He is an android. Data expected the creatures to react the way everybody else reacted upon meeting their first android, but the Direndites didn't seem to care. The one called Ponshab said, "Acknowledged," and then all three turned their backs and walked outside. Data blinked. "Did I do something wrong?" No. That's just the way they are," said Spinnaker. "Like you, Data, the Direndites have no emotions. They're the only species known to be completely psi-blind. Because of that, their idea of courtesy leaves something to be desired. What they lack in social grace, however, they make up for in intelligence and drive. They're remarkable people. The scientists have been invaluable to this project, since they're the only ones who can safely handle the Tsidi." "You mean the statues?" Data asked. "What exactly are Tsidi, Professor?" Spinnaker scratched thoughtfully at the stubble on his chin. "Because of their decorations and the fact that they contain unusually strong emotional impressions, we think they're art objects. There seem to be two kinds. Small ones we call Tsidi, and the larger ones which we call Tsidi batteries. We found out the hard way that the batteries are dangerous. Even after 400,000 years, they still contain incredibly strong emotional impressions, so strong that species possessing emotions can't touch them without risking psychological damage." He sighed. "One of my best scientists and a good friend ended up in intensive care when he found the first battery. No one but the Direndites has touched them since." With visible effort, Spinnaker rallied his good spirits again. "But you, Data? Well, go ahead, touch one." Perhaps he should have been cautious, but curiosity got the better of Data. He reached out to touch the surface of the Tsidi he'd attempted to touch before, a battery about 2 feet tall, shaped something like a big twisted flower pot, colored a deep blue and accented with delicate gold patterns. The tip of Data's index finger made contact. Nothing. He lay his palm flat against the cool porcelain-like surface. Nothing. Almost disappointed, Data picked up the battery with both hands. Nothing. "Excellent," crowed Spinnaker. "You can assist the Direndites if you like, then. I believe the Tsidi are something important, but so far we can't tell what role they played in Arunu culture." "I am at your disposal," Data said, carefully lowering the battery pack to the floor. "But will my involvement disturb the Direndites?" "Nothing disturbs the Direndites," Spinnaker assured him. "It's logical for you to participate, so they'll be glad, so to speak, to let you participate. Their way of thinking is completely practical." Data was fascinated by the idea of an entire culture that based its decision-making processes solely on an advantage-disadvantage basis. Like machines, Direndites behaved according to their circumstances, not their feelings about those circumstances. As far as Data was concerned, their way of thinking made more sense than that of humans, or even Vulcans. However, after experiencing their cold greeting, Data decided that he still preferred the company of humans. A scream from outside interrupted his thoughts. Data instantly identified the voice. "T'Pira!" He rushed out of the storage shed to find T'Pira as she had been when he'd last seen her, standing before a row of Tsidi lined up on a work table. What he hadn't noticed before was the Tsidi battery under the table. T'Pira's eyes were locked wide open and focused on it, her mouth still open from screaming, her body rigid. Then she collapsed. With superhuman reflexes, Data sprang forward and caught her before she hit the ground. "Water!" Spinnaker barked to a nearby workman, and the fellow dashed off to the supply shed. "Was she touching the battery?" Spinnaker asked Data worriedly. "Did you notice if her hand was reaching for it?" "Both hands were at her sides," Data reported, gently laying T'Pira on the ground. "Besides, I do not think T'Pira would have touched the Tsidi, sir, even if she were sure that it was safe. You suggested that we not touch anything today." A flicker of uncomfortable energy stabbed at Data's consciousness. His ethics program reminded him that he had almost done that very thing. He resolved to control his curiosity in the future. The workman returned with a jug of water, and Spinnaker sprinkled some on a cloth and pressed it to Tapira's forehead. "No weapons," she was murmuring, as if in a trance. "Something else, something..." She spoke so softly that Data almost didn't hear her now. Then she snapped, wide awake. "I am fine now." Data helped her sit up, and Spinnaker offered her the water jug. "What happened?" the professor demanded. "I did not touch anything," Tapira hastily declared. "I was looking at those artifacts, and then my attention was drawn to that large urn under the table. Before I knew it, my mind was locked on some kind of..." She groped for the word. "Frequency, waves of violent black emotions surged into me. I could not break away." She trembled, fighting to keep her Vulcan composure. Spinnaker was glaring at the CD battery. "Punjab," he snapped. "What is that battery doing out in the open? I gave you strict orders to keep them inside." Data watched as Punjab, apparently the lead Dirondite scientist, stepped forward. "The specimen requires more cleaning," he said in his neutral, raspy voice. "Pen Sid does not place CD in the storage shed until all cleaning procedures are complete." Spinnaker calmed down. The explanation seemed reasonable. "Well, just be aware of our guests from here on, please." "Yes, Professor." "What happened?" Cadet Fantico and the rest of the Starfleet Academy team came running up, accompanied by Dr. Ching. Lucas knelt down by Tapira. "You okay?" "I am fine, Lucas," Tapira said, and again explained what she'd experienced. "This has never happened before," Dr. Ching said worriedly. "I'm in charge of the storage units. If I'd had any idea such mental contact was possible, I'd have kept this unit locked." "Doctor, there's no reason to blame yourself," said Fantico. "If batteries are as powerful as you say, perhaps it was Tapira's natural telepathic gifts that lured her into a mind lock with that thing. At least we know to stay away from them now." Tapira struggled to stand, but Spinnaker gently motioned her to stay put. "What I find puzzling," he said, "is that the few negatively charged objects we've found so far have never relayed violent emotions without direct contact. Many of the CD batteries are negatively charged, but unless touched, they only create a vague sense of uneasiness." He looked questioningly up at Punjab. "We have only the ability to measure the intensity of CD energy output," the Dirondite stated, "not the quality of the emotions. The batteries, such as that one, we have been unable to explain." He pointed a bony white finger at one particular section of the dig. "Section 12 has contained more batteries than other sections." "And Section 12 hadn't yet been excavated when the telepaths were here," said Dr. Ching. Data turned to her. "Telepaths?" "I tried using the talents of various telepathic species to study artifacts, especially the CD," explained Spinnaker. "But none of the telepaths could make sense of the impressions they received. I even invited the Vulcan Kolinar Masters to come as well, hoping that their total mastery of emotion might help unravel the mystery. I guess the idea of an intense emotional experience didn't appeal to them." "It would not," Tapira confirmed. "You're the first of your species to experience a CD, Cadet Tapira," Spinnaker said. "Data, if you would." It took a moment for Data to figure out what Spinnaker wanted. Then he saw how weakly Tapira moved as she tried to get up. He bent to help her, but she impatiently waved him away. "I can stand," she said, barely struggling to her feet. "Data," said Dr. Ching, "why don't you take her to Dolly's Bar and Grill, that building over there? and she pointed. It has a controlled environment. T'Pera can take off her mask and relax. Data was about to ask who Dolly was when he remembered Arunuani. This was probably another case of naming an inanimate object, he decided, in this case a whole building. The interior of Dolly's bar and grill wasn't big. 4 round tables with chairs, portable replicator on a squat cabinet, and 3 cots filled almost all of its rectangular space. But once its inner door was sealed, T'Pera took off her mask and breathed deeply, as if she just entered a fragrant garden. Data also removed his mask. He gestured T'Pera to sit, then ordered hot tea from the replicator. Perhaps a warm beverage will help you recover, he said, handing her the steaming cup. Thank you, T'Pera sipped. Data was gratified to see her shoulders relax. She sighed. Perhaps I should tell the professor what else I felt, she said, pronouncing the word felt with an inflection of distaste. Data sat down next to her. Your report was not complete? It was, in the sense that I reported all facts. But of this one sensation, I am not sure. T'Pera paused. As my mind was caught in the storm of negativity, I sensed destruction. She obviously didn't like her choice of words, but could think of nothing better. It was as if I could feel everything around me, all life, all that exists, simply gone in one instant. I think that's when I fainted. You mumbled the words, no weapons, something else, Data told her. I do not believe anyone heard you but myself. What did you mean by that? T'Pera's eyes narrowed. I do not remember saying it. And she did something that Data had never seen a Vulcan do before. She shivered, but not because it was cold. The temperature in the room was maintained at a pleasant 22 degrees Celsius. Something is wrong, Data, T'Pera said. The CD are wrong. That night, Data and his fellow team members settled into their camp quarters. They were assigned one large room with a contained environment, so their oxygen masks weren't needed. That, however, turned out to be the only luxury about the place. The walls were bare thermoplaster, and the floors were covered with thin synthetic carpeting. 5 cots in a row against the wall, 2 tables, 5 chairs, and 3 mismatched lamps made up the furnishings. They had to go outside to a separate building to use the bathing facilities. We run a Spartan operation, Spinnaker told them with a wink. Just think of it as your dorm away from dorm. Fantico handed out files about the Arunu operation that Spinnaker wanted them to read. Bios of all the dig personnel, explanations of the equipment in use and the supplies available, the camp layout, the dig's source of funding, detailed background information that would be helpful when they began participation the following day. While they read, Fantico left to meet Professor Tesh in the communication hut to receive the cadets' homework assignments for that night. Data scanned his file in less than 30 seconds. He wondered why it didn't contain much information about the 3 Dirandites. It covered general information about their planet, as well as descriptions of some of the unique tools the scientists were using at the site. But as for the species itself, all Data learned was that Duranda was on shaky terms with the Federation. Being without emotions, Dirandite politicians were considered by many Federation species to be rude, even brutal, and simple communication always led to arguments. The idea of polite manners simply didn't exist in their world. As yet, they had seen no advantage to joining the Federation, and the presence of scientists Ponshab, Pondebek, and Pen Sazid at the dig was one of the few outreach efforts that had ever drawn the aliens out of their home system. Most of the cadets were finished reading their files by the time Fantico returned. "Well, it looks like the comm system is out," she announced. "Professor Tesh is working on it, but he doesn't know what the problem is. He told me that if they can't repair it, Starbase 25 will automatically send a ship to check on us in 5 days." 5 days? Squealed Zhu. "We can't be gone that long. Well, what about our other classes?" "And all the homework," added Lucas. Fantico put her hands on her hips. This kind of thing can happen on a remote site, cadets. You know that. Handle it. That's what this training is all about." "Oh," Lucas said with a sly grin. "So that's it. A little test for us, eh? See how well we deal with the pressures of isolation, eh?" He nudged Tapira. "The comm system is out." "Right. I suggest you treat this as a real event, Mr. Whitlock," warned Fantico. "My report on your behavior and the report submitted by Professor Spinnaker will treat the matter as real, whether it is or not. Even I don't know for sure." With his grade on the line, Lucas straightened up. Aye, sir." Data held up his hand. "Excuse me." "Yes, Data?" said Fantico. "I believe I can offer a solution to the classwork assignment dilemma. To satisfy my own curiosity, I recently downloaded all the textbook information required by every freshman-level class the Academy offers, as well as all suggested supplemental texts." Noting everyone's look of amazement, Data explained. "For me, it is a simple matter of plugging into the Academy Library network. If you wish, I can recite the lessons each of you requires." "Well, I'll be," said Lucas. "You don't have to study, do you?" Data was quick to correct such a misleading conclusion. "On the contrary, Lucas, I must study a great deal. However, much of what I need to learn is different from what the average cadet has to study." Data noticed how relaxed the cadets were now as they focused on the situation at hand. He made no mention of it, but the emotional energy radiating from the ruins was affecting them less and less. Even Zhu appeared to be at ease. The next hour passed with Data reciting class texts to each cadet. When he was finished, Fantico called lights out. "If you don't mind my asking," she said before turning out the last lamp, "what do you do at night, Mr. Data? You don't sleep, do you?" "No, I do not. However, I have downloaded literary texts to study. At present, I am engaged in a critical analysis of the complete works of the 20th century author Stephen King. I will be sufficiently occupied until morning." The cadets said good night. As they drifted off to sleep in their bunks, Data sat at the table, silent and motionless, wondering how a pet cemetery could bring dead people back to life.